Great. Let me grab a link to the agenda. There we go. I put it in the Zoom chat. So yeah, hey everyone, this is mev-boost community call number 9. It's been a little while since the last call, but here we are. And yeah, good to see everyone. So yeah, we'll go ahead and jump into it. Very briefly to kick us off, I was just going to discuss Electra. This is the next Ethereum hard fork scheduled. And yeah, there was some initial prototyping work around the builder APIs to support the hard fork. I think I mainly just wanted to call it, there will be some changes. I think even as we're working through the different dev nets, as we iterate towards what the hard fork ultimately looks like, we're already seeing there's some things we'll need to change. Nothing too crazy, but yeah, just wanted to call it out. Next up, I think we have a bit of an announcement. Chris, did you want to say something about the relay scan bid archive?
Yeah, my pleasure. We finally got around to publishing this bid archive as part of RelayScan, which collects bids in a bunch of ways. There is a documentation link that goes into more detail in what it does. It collects bids with get header polling, data API polling, and the ultrasound top bid WebSocket stream. And this archive is based on a nightly upload. So basically every day, I think at UTC 2 a.m., the archive from the last day is uploaded. It's only the transaction hash and some metadata, no raw transaction, obviously, because the bits, they are still private. But we hope that this facilitates more exploration and data analysis. And we have heard that this would have already been useful to a bunch of people looking into this. Curious to see what's coming out of that.
Yeah, this sounds super awesome. I haven't had a chance to play with it myself, but thanks for putting it together. And yeah, I know this data is definitely super valuable. So hopefully, yeah, let's do some really cool analyses. Great. Next up, there was a disclosure hot off the presses that I think many of you here are aware of. But just for posterity's sake, there was a underflow bug found in the mev-boost relay. I believe it's been patched in the required places. But yeah, just wanted to call it out. Essentially, the issue was, well, actually, let's see. Does someone want to give a summary of the issue? Let's see, Shay's
Sure.
here. Yeah. Or
yeah,
yeah,
Shay,
everyone
go
actually.
ahead.
Yeah.
I'm happy to give a quick overview. Basically, Ultrasound got a report from some builders that they were posting a bid value that is impossibly high. It's like more ETH than exists on Ethereum or something crazy like that. Looked into it and found that there was a bug in the reference implementation for payload validation that relays use. We actually think, on reflecting a bit more, this may have been related to some upgrades from Dencun, where we changed from using BigInts to, I think, UINT 256, and we lost some built-in underflow checking. That's our hypothesis as to why it became an issue recently. But we were able to find the bug. We posted a patch, got it audited, and shipped out to all relays in a couple of hours. And fortunately, because the builders disclosed this kind of discreetly and directly to the relays, we don't think we have any evidence that somebody exploited it, because there is a way you might be able to use a bug like this to basically post a bid that seems really, really high, win the auction, but actually not pay the proposer very much. So we're just a shout out to the people who reported it, so we could limit the impact pretty much to just one block. There's more about it in the post on the forum, but I think that's the TLDR.
Great, thanks. Yeah, Alex, was there any color you wanted to add, or did that pretty much cover it?
No, I think that that covers it. Maybe the only interesting thing that I still noted in this was that we accepted a really high bid, and it's like it was only this combination of a builder submitting an impossibly high bid and it then somehow passing simulation that alerted us to something being off. But yeah, really, like thanks for everyone involved in the quick turnaround, and Shaya on the disclosure stuff.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together. It's really nice to see. One second. My cat is attacking. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. Cool. Yeah, thanks for putting this together. And yeah, it's nice to see the disclosure, just for posterity's sake, so we see what's happening. And yeah, good to see. So
well, maybe for completeness sake, like this can definitely be exploited. If you haven't patched, like you need to immediately do it. But I think everybody is in the shared security group and everybody is aware.
Great. Yeah, definitely. If you don't know what we're talking about, please take a look.
Yeah.
My understanding is that everyone is aware that needs to be aware. But at this point, it's public, so there you go. Great. Usually in the past, we've had time for updates around optimistic relaying. I don't know if anyone here has anything to share there. I think it's kind of just been moving along swimmingly over the last couple months. Is there anything worth discussing? Okay, sounds like no. Great. Yeah, next up, let's see, is Drew here? I don't see him. So I was gonna have Drew on to give an update around commit boost. I think many of you have heard of commit boost, but if not, I'll just give like a quick TLDR. So essentially, it's an effort that has come up quite recently, basically to have an extensible platform for all of these different types of like browser commitments, essentially. So, one way to think about this is that mev-boost provides this like PBS protocol. There's mev-boost to software. There's also mev-boost to protocol. And so mev-boost to protocol gives you a way to make commitments around, right, selling your block as a proposer to some builder. And we're seeing a lot of research efforts around new types of commitments. So for example, like pre-confirmations, people have talked about inclusion lists and like all sorts of things. So that's well and good, but you can imagine that, if we have these different pre-confirmation ideas, people go, they fork mev-boost, in the limit, there's now all these forks in mev-boost, which is like kind of a huge pain to keep track of just in terms of testing and security. So one idea with commit boost is to basically have a platform that is extensible in a way that mev-boost is currently not today. mev-boost is software, and can basically serve as this foundation layer for all these different types of commitment protocols people are looking into. So yeah, that's quick TLDR. And yeah, I guess Drew's not on the call. I don't know if anyone here wants to say anything else about commit boost. Otherwise, we might just save it for a future call.
Maybe I can make a comment on the pre-confirmation part real quick. As you guys know, I'd started PrimeMev and mev-commit out of the first meeting of the mev-boost stewards call. And we've oriented it around being 100% compatible with mev-boost, where relays are the ones kind of doing the filtering that's required to make sure the pre-confirmations are kind of adhered to. So the commit boost is a separate effort, and it seems compatible with this, and mev commit is compatible with either, but it's not a requirement that we fork mev boost. In fact, we have pre-confirmations working on the whole ski testnet for 5 months now without a mev boost fork. So I just want to kind of set that so that everybody is on the same page around like mev-boost being compatible with pre-confirmations as is. But we can do upgrades and do all sorts of other modules as well with something like commit boost.
Nice. So with Premev, is there any like changes to how proposers sign things to support pre-confirmations or no?
Not for mev-boost. What we've positioned relays to do is basically be able to claim or ask for a rev share because of this filtration additional work that they're doing, which we have an ongoing grant proposal with the PBS Guild on, and hope to present some of the results of this experiment to the folks here. And I've appreciated some of the folks who have given some comments on this from this group as well.
Cool, thanks. I do know from talking to Drew, who's kind of spearheading the commit boost effort, I think that they are looking to have something ready for an upcoming testnet at ECC. So yeah, we will check back in after that, see how it goes.
So I'm actually curious to see like what I've been asked recently quite a lot, and also I'm at the Edge City research event. There's still seem amongst the researchers that quite some concerns with the centralizing impact of precoms. So in general, so like I think I'm trying to like what is everyone's thoughts on seeing like commit boost more so of a modular Rust implementation upgrade on the software side, or like are we seeing it much more so closely related to precoms? And how do we think about precoms from a mev-boost community, mev-boost maintainer perspective?
Yeah, I mean, just to chime in, I think there's two things here. So one is like, again, like the software of things that's implementing these various protocols. And then also there's the layer of the protocols themselves. So yeah, I mean, I think there's all sorts of things people on this call and other places have like wanted to change around like the software. So I think there's like a conversation to be had there around, okay, are there like features to mev-boost the software we want to implement? Are there like learnings from this like extensibility sort of framing of things that would be helpful? Separately, yeah, I think it's super early with the pre-confirmations themselves. I mean, yeah, like that's my concern as well around like the centralization of things here, because it does seem like all the pre-confirmation protocols today have this like centralized gateway node that's much like a relay. The concern then is if you have similar issues that we've seen with mev-boost, the protocol, sort of be reinforced with the pre-confirmation protocols as they come online. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thanks for sharing. I think Drew just joined, right?
Yeah.
An hour off in my time change, so I apologize.
It's all good. We were just talking about commit boost. I gave a quick overview. I don't know if you wanted to say anything around like some of the recent progress or how you guys are thinking about the next steps there.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know who on this call does and doesn't have context, so maybe I can start a bit with that. Yeah, commit boost is an effort to, as Alex was saying, the idea is to create a platform for validators to safely make commitments. And what we're working on is a standardization effort for that, and to reduce the risk of a bunch of sidecars being out there. And the idea of commit boost is less about run a sidecar and more about run one sidecar and opt into these different commitments. And how this interacts, because a lot of people on this call are familiar with mev-boost, is mev-boost would be a module or an opt-in option for this. Sorry, my cat is also attacking me. Would be an opt-in module as one example. So it would be, a module would be enabled 100% backwards compatibility. But then there's now this whole effort outside of mev-boost, whether forks or, completely different designs of new sidecars that enable things like pre-confs. as an example. And this would also allow validators to opt into those things. And the idea behind commit boost is to streamline that so people like home stakers can participate in those markets and potentially delegate some of those tasks away, similar to what we see in PBS. But also sophisticated actors not having to run 5 to 6 different sidecars and the fragmentation and risks that can come from that. The other benefit of commit boost, or at least how we see it, is around hard forks and core developers. If we can, as a community, unify behind one standard when those hard forks take place, we're only worrying about one sort of sidecar. And the vision longer term of commit boost is it'll be a not-for-profit entity that will develop open source software for Ethereum with the focus on this software commit boost. There'll be a team of a couple people sort of dedicated to this, just for sustainability. But when things go wrong, they're there for coverage, and then also they're there interacting with core devs around hard forks. All these coordination mechanisms is kind of the idea. The entity itself will be funded through grants, is the mission and goal here, and there's no intentions for commit boost, the entity, to be sold or bought or start side hustles. It's purely a not-for-profit, and helping push forward, or at least sustain core parts of Ethereum infrastructure that isn't part of the protocol itself. So that's kind of the context and mission around it. Where we're at to date, this started just a couple months ago due to some of the things that were happening in the market and the fragmentation we started to see. We had a DevNet at Zoo Berlin. This was bigger than Commit Boost. There were a lot of teams working on pre-comps and base sequencing, but Commit Boost module was used throughout that. And then ECC, there's a testnet called Helder, which Helder is somewhat separate from Commit Boost, but we're operating within there. Helder is really a persistent testnet for all teams building in proposer commitments, base sequencing, and pre-comps to have an iterative place to work through that. So we're help coordinating that, but it's not specific to Commit Boost. And then post that, we should have an MVP of Commit Boost. We're going to start running this in Oleski with teams, or asking teams to help us with this to start out some testing, and then audited code by end of summer. The repo is open source, and I think previously at Zoo, we just really had one team developing this. And now we have multiple teams and should have even more before ECC submitting code and helping with us. And then, yeah, I think longer term governance wise, still working with Alex on how best to have that happen, but really see this as something similar to ACDC, where the stakeholders get on a call, or even similar to this call. People get on, we talk about changes that need to be made. There's consensus, and either there's a team that develops that themselves, or we can leverage the devs that sit within the Commit Boost entity to help with that. But the idea is before ECC to also have somewhat of a roadmap towards what the initial governance structure would look like for that, just to and gather feedback and get others to provide insight based on what we've learned in the past. So I'll kind of pause there. Hopefully that gives some context on where we're at, what it is, the mission, and some of the risks we're trying to mitigate, or at least we see as this is a solution to mitigate that. But yeah, thanks Alex for the opportunity to come on and talk. And sorry again, I was late, everyone, just off an hour. So
it's all good. Yeah, thanks for the update. Yeah, I mean, what I like the most is just reducing fragmentation, like you called out. Like, again, even just now we have this disclosure about this bug in the validation node, and imagine if there's like 20 pre-confirmation protocols. Now there's like 20 times overhead in terms of tracking bugs and disclosures and all of this thing. So, I greatly prefer a world where there's like one sort of middleware sidecar software that we all standardize around. Yeah, if that then leads to new experimentation with all these different reconfirmation ideas or inclusion list ideas or things like that, that's also super cool. Yeah. Chris?
I was curious if there is some documentation out there already about this, like proposal signature collection and like penalties for breaking their commitments.
yeah, I think there's teams that have developed docs around this. This isn't yeah, commit boost is somewhat agnostic to these things, i.e., all we're trying to do is standardize how a signature is requested. What people do with that signature is somewhat, I'll say, up to the pre-comp teams building their protocols and how that's handled. So commit boost doesn't limit, for instance, the platforms that are used, which I guess is good and bad. So, you could use slashing mechanisms via eigenlayer. You could use slashing mechanisms via symbiotic, or you could use, cryptographic, or maybe you could, run this through Suave, things like that. So there isn't opinions about the slashing mechanisms that commit boost is making or enforcing on the market. It's really an open design space. How signatures are provided via commit boost, that is an open question, which we probably won't even get to before ECC, but keen to engage with folks, if they have ideas, and we're trying to come up at least with like an initial concept that people can start reacting to and, tell us we're dumb and are down the right path or down the right path. But it's one of those open things that we still haven't largely figured out. And as you know, there's different dynamics because there's things like Dirk and Web3 Signer. There's some clients that don't allow for remote signing. There's teams that use proxy signatures. There's a whole host of things, and you were just still somewhat figuring that out.
Okay, also kind of like, can we expect like some write-up exploring this problem space? I would be very curious to get a little bit more of a context there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, yeah, we're probably not going to get there before ECC, but post that, and happy to have a call and go through those things. And yeah, we've started, I think, we've started to put PRs into the repo. People will see this. It just took us a little bit to get going. So I think some people have been critical of the open source nature of this. It wasn't intended, it was just getting things going. But yeah, the repo is fully public, and we're trying to get PRs into that and, track all these things, and keen to get people's feedback around it. I think at ECC is when we'll present sort of like the updated design specs for people to react to. I don't think it will have too much to do with signatures, but if it does, Chris, we can flag that to you. And in addition to the updated specs and how we're thinking about things, also talking about the governance. So we'll be presenting that at base sequencing day hosted by Espresso and Cake in the morning.
All right, thanks for the update.
Can we double click on this pre-confirmation sidecar thing? Maybe because Drew's here, it's a good opportunity. As far as I'm aware, mev.io is on mainnet with the pre-confirmation thing, which again leverages relays, does not use a sidecar, as I understand. Whenever we talk to validators, the only sidecar they mention is the Bloxroute sidecar, which is not necessarily for pre-confirmations. So and then, mev commit also does not require a sidecar other than mev-boost. So maybe we can like elaborate why the sidecar is required in the first place. And then like are others like Bloxroute like trying to use this instead of their sidecar, or like how should validators kind of think about this? Like this would be helpful to like know as we're talking to them.
Yeah, so I think what would help everyone is like having an open source example of basically an integration, right? I believe there's a commit boost module for mev-boost the protocol. But yeah, I haven't seen anything for like one of these pre-confirmation, projects using commit boost in this way. So it sounds like it might just be a bit early.
Yeah, no,
but yeah, I think that would really help.
Yeah, there are a couple. Gmev is probably the most popular one. It's a fork of mev-boost and it integrates quite a bit. It would require a sidecar. I think the Bolt implementation too, at least the initial one, required a sidecar. Yeah, they've shifted a bit. I can't speak on behalf of these teams, but I know those at least two examples are out there.
I just pasted the docs and how we leverage mev-boost to do it, so people can look at that.
Yeah, I just want to talk about too, commit boost isn't just about pre-comps, it's about other commitments. So even in Helder, we're working with some folks in the community that have, just volunteer time to work on inclusion lists, for instance. And so there will be ideally some home stakers kind of interacting with these modules that allow for inclusion list. Again, the inclusion list design people are using, it's streamlined just to get some concepts out there. To get iterating on things, and I don't think it's the end design people will go with. And some of this reprioritization is just because inclusion lists aren't in the next hard fork, and so I think some people are excited to think of ways in the near term that we could potentially get some form of inclusion list. onto mainnet.
Yeah, I think running with that and the initial pitch where, you guys highlighted like support for Grafana or Prometheus and stuff would make the conversations with validators easier.
Yeah, and that's so yeah, the focus of Commit Boost is both standardization to reduce fragmentation, but also a lot around giving validators the tools, particularly around telemetry. So if we can get teams to build to this standard, they then unlock a whole suite of things. And we give them the standardized tool set to do things like limit CPU usage per module, just so like if something goes out of whack, it doesn't crash their whole box. A lot of the data throughout the supply chain themselves will have telemetry defined, so you could build, Grafana dashboard on top so they can have insight into their box. It's ideas like that. And I can't talk through personally all the technical details, but that's like a core focus too, is understanding from validators maybe what tool sets they develop proprietary ways that they'd be willing to somewhat give insight to, so that we can build this in an open source tool that all validators can leverage.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that. I kind of see this as, how can we do responsible experimentation with what proposers are committing to, and then what is actually the things that they want to experiment is kind of like the the neutral thing, and what other people can come up with. And then from a relay perspective, it would be really nice to not have to worry about all these different forks and just have one standard way to deal with it, and to agree on the how, and to also make sure that we don't become gatekeepers for what proposers are allowed to do with their right to propose.
Yeah, I think that's an important sort of framing, like separating out this, again, like foundational software layer from all these different protocols. I think even with some of the conversation I've seen other places, these things kind of get mixed together, and yeah, it complicates the conversation. Yeah.
I actually think that Stefan may have had a really good, interesting point. But I was going to ask in terms of more concretely from like a mev-boost community perspective. Like how do we, what is the timeline, and how do we think about like forward-looking technical changes roadmap to the mev-boost protocol as well as sidecar? Since I think the commit boost conversation is a great step that I think accelerated kind of the discourse around how do we think about the design space. So maybe it's more also just hearing your thoughts, Stokes, and from everyone else, what's been contributing to the mev-boost ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, just my take is kind of what I said a minute ago. Like, I really don't want to have, in different forks of mev-boost, having to track them all. If there's like security issues, it just becomes a mess to like track down who is, relevant to fix it, how do we fix it, and all of this stuff. So yeah, I think it's like you're saying, like having some way to avoid different fragmentation, and again, like thinking about how do we evolve this like sidecar software that we have today is super helpful and very valuable. So that I think is really exciting. And yeah, otherwise we just have to see, I think, how these different things stack up in terms of the ways in which people want to use these different commitment protocols.
So are we imagining a kind of world where a solo staker might be able to download, I don't know, like or look at a kind of marketplace of plugins which all do different kind of proposer commitment type things, and give some kind of assurance of their kind of security properties and whether they've been ordered, or do you think Commit Boost would look to try and audit everything that became a plugin for Commit Boost?
Yeah, I mean, I strongly feel Commit Boost should not be limiting modules that are added in any way, governance over those types of things. Validators will still need to do their diligence around what they're committing to. and yeah, not being the arbiter of how to police that, I think is a very bad idea. That's my personal opinion. Kind of what I very strongly believe.
Yeah, the idea of commit boost is that it is this like neutral, again, like foundational layer for all these different things, at least as I understand it. So that would be like the way to approach it. That being said, it does open this question of like, yeah, module governance. And it's like, okay, do validators just pick any modules from like this app store and everything's good? Do we just have like, you know, software or like hardware sort of constraints around the modules and call it a day? Like, I think that part's a little underspecified at the moment. And yeah, having more modules to like make it more concrete, I think will help there. Yeah, you can imagine there's like commit boost core maintainers and like they have a view on like what are good modules and what aren't. But yeah, at least my personal approach is to be as governance minimized as possible.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Alex.
But I imagine there'd be teams like similar to what we see in ADSs, I guess. I'm sure there would be teams that do this analysis for validators, you know, whoever else.
Right. But then you have this question, like this has come up in like, for example, like core development with like Ethereum consensus clients. It's like the clients could take more opinionated views, and like sometimes they do, but then it like, yeah, it definitely takes on like more risk for them and definitely constrains like what's possible. So yeah, it's tricky. Governance is always the hard part. Okay. There was a question Steph had in the chat, essentially around using commit boost for fork coordination. This is a whole can of worms, but you can imagine the limits. Like this is even people using stuff like, you know, a module for like a market for reorgs, which is very dangerous. So yeah, I hear you on this. I don't know if you had more to say on that stuff, but my response is essentially that I hear you, but you could also fork commit boost today and do the same thing. So I don't think commit boost itself really changes sort of the consideration there.
I can jump on and just say a few words. I remember like in the early days of mev-geth, there was kind of like this whole debacle around reorgs because people got sort of excited about writing sidecars that would allow for miners to coordinate around doing like reorg MEV. And then there was like a huge community-wide sort of immune system response saying like, no, this is like really bad idea and like zero something and like we shouldn't do it. And so it seems like somewhat that like the Overton window has shifted in that people are a little bit more comfortable with validators running all kinds of different rules. And like the conversation here is actually like, how do we reduce the level of friction to running new sidecars to make it as seamless as possible? So there's a question of like, how do we do it? And there's a question of should we do it? I just wonder if there's been some discussion around this. I'm not like involved enough in here to really have much of an opinion, but I assume that there's people that have explored the pros and cons of introducing this kind of software to the stack.
Yeah, I mean, I think my take is just what I said. Like, I hear you that it like lowers barriers to entry, perhaps some, but it's really not that different as I see it to just having a fork of mev-boost that does the same thing. And separately, then that also ties back to the previous point around governance. Like, that's the whole point of any sort of governance around this thing is to say, okay, you know, there are some things that are bad, you know, TM. There's like a hard red line in the sand, and these things are not okay to run.
Fair enough.
Terrence?
I think it's also like important to like separate validators, the proposals into like different bucket and category, right? For example, you have your solo validators, which is like kind of the 10%, which is what we deal with Discord. They're kind of more naive. They just follow like whatever. They kind of just chase whatever is the highest APY, and some of them are more like altruistic. they basically rather sell build, right? But they are on the other spectrum. There are more advanced validators like Lido, for example, right? But those have to go to the Lido governance, for example. For example, for running Lido validator, I cannot even choose what relayer I can use, right? I have to use a relayer. I have to opt into specific strategy. So for that, it's kind of a different beast as well. So yeah, so we may look at it from like so I think it might be worth analyzing it from like a different perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. Like it's the same thing here where it's like, okay, if there are like 3, 4, imagine a world where there's like 10 different mev-boost relays, and it's kind of the same thing where like if one relay is being like shady somehow, we kind of have settled on pushing those concerns into the social layer where we say, okay, there's like some kind of policing where we say, if this relay is acting bad or harmful, essentially, we just tell everyone not to use them. Which again comes around to governance and all this sort of thing. So I agree, it's like an important thing to consider. I don't think commit boost itself like really changes the game there.
Can you do the same with the mev-boost forks? So if somebody forked it and it's a reorg marketplace and we don't approve, you could socially shut it down too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the same thing where it's like, okay, if there was like a malicious mev-boost fork, we could all take to Twitter and be like, hey, this is bad. In the limit, you have like social slashing and all this as like a sort of ultimate, or maybe like a, let's say a more concrete or more sort of hard solution. Yeah.
So I'm curious for the commit boost contributors like Drew and Kubi and co.
You cut out for me.
Yeah. There's more contributors than that too now. So
Right, sorry, I just couldn't name all of the I know there's quite a few teams there, so congratulations on the growth. What would be a good what would be a really great outcome from your perspective? Whether it's the commit, I would say commit boost contributors as well as the pre-conf researcher community perspective. What would be like if you have a magic wand, what would be an ask for the mev-boost community?
yeah, I don't know, the pre-comp things, it's just a module similar to inclusion list or mev-boost. So while that's kind of the first use case that has the most excitement, we expect others to be on board. So less of an opinion, I guess, on the research side for pre-comps. With the mev-boost community, I think there's been a lot of ideas over time and challenges that people have faced. And, if the community's bought into this, bringing, having those people help be part of this, I think we're open to a lot of that. And I think it'd be the biggest thing is just get involved, provide ideas, feedback. If you want to sit down and code, read specs, I mean, we want the feedback. So super excited for that. I think there's just been like some practical things where we had the idea and now it's like putting the idea into actual specs and then iterating with people across the community on that is where we're at now. Ideally, in the end, this has reduced fragmentation. It gives proposers a safe platform to make commitments, and it doesn't cause some social drift or ruin Ethereum, I think. But an end vision would be that, yeah, we're unifying across the whole Ethereum community towards a standard and allow for safe commitments to be made. And then beyond that, getting something like this into the CL eventually, / things like ETs happen, and it's not really relevant software anymore. But but I think that's quite a way to ways, and we just have a bunch of people sprinting in the near term that we need to mitigate this risk around.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. Like you can imagine the goal of commit boost is maybe the same as the goal of mev-boost, at least on paper, which is to get rid of it. That being said, like at least I feel like the longer we have mev-boost relays, and that whole ecosystem, it like just gets enshrined more over time. So definitely something to think through with commit boost. Like, is that a realistic goal? Which I think is like a worthwhile goal worth striving for, but yeah, it's tricky. There are these like different protocol proposals we could imagine. I think it'll be years before we see them. And then the question is like, yeah, is this something that will actually happen? You know?
What is Commit Boost latest thinking around timeline in terms of adoption? Because I think I think this is it pegged to the pre-conf timeline, or is it going to be more independent of it?
Sorry, I missed that. Is that a commit boost question or a mev-boost question? Sorry.
Commit Boost question in terms of timeline. Yeah.
We're trying to have audited code by the end of the summer with this running and being fully backwards compatible. So having a mev-boost plain vanilla module going, so validators can day one have this running. There is some urgency because there are pre-comps teams pushing things, and so having this as an option for validators and also coordinating across those teams building pre-comp protocols to help build modules, be part of this, which we're on that active path of. But that's, I guess, the goal is end of summer. You know, these things can always slip. We are trying to do some Haleski testing with an MVP. It's not a final product. There's still some core decisions that have to be made, like the signer side of things, and working through that, like Chris said. And it's mostly to start gathering feedback, seeing it in real time. Is it fully backwards compatible? Things like that. And I guess governance perspective, the hope is to have grants start coming in just before ECC or around ECC, getting the entities stood up, and really publishing a roadmap around how that will, how this will work. That will probably take, into the end of summer too.
Right, that's exciting. So perhaps on this note, this is I think a invitation also for everyone on this call, that we are hosting. By we, I meant more on my PBS Foundation contributors head, in the sense of we're hosting a salon discussion that focuses on the tech tree of like within the broader PBS, ePBS, APS space, as well as there's an afternoon we'll be having a discussion about the out of protocol technical governance. And I think this is I think mev-boost was the first out of protocol development that needs to be, like, I would say that's actually like closely coordinated across many different entities. And now with the various whether it's pre-comp for other modules that are potentially sidecars considered, I think all will have the same set of challenges in terms of the social layer, and in terms of technical decision making. I'll leave it as that, because I think I'm definitely welcoming anyone who's interested in posting kind of relevant questions on how to think about minimal technical governance that's still sound and has a security first outcome. So yeah, we can chat async for anyone who's interested in technical governance.
Cool. And there is a link to the event in the chat, just calling that out. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Drew. Anything else on commit boost? Otherwise, we will go back to mev-boost, the protocol.
No, that's it. Sorry again, I was late. Glad you all got to meet my cat. It's good. Thank you for having me.
All good. Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Cool. So the next thing I had on the agenda was to discuss blobs. Let me go find the agenda. I'll drop this post here. I think people are aware there was some turbulence in the blob fee market. I think last week I was actually on holiday, so I kind of missed exactly what happened, but I've been catching up. And yeah, it sounds like basically, I think there are a number of things just around L2s and like blob consumers being immature, possibly now questions of like, do L1 clients handle blobs in like the most optimal way? For the people here today, I did want to talk about like how this impacts the MEV supply chain. So, you know, yeah, first I'll just call out this link that I dropped in the chat. I think there's a pretty good summary here, again, from Shay. And yeah, so maybe to kick us off, like, I think there's a number of things that we could do. I think the first big question is like, do builders include blobs? And if not, why? I'm not sure if anyone here who's a builder or maybe some relays who have insight into this. Is there any context anyone could add here?
I can add some context. So I guess we initially, when blobs first came to mainnet, we actually just naively like included every blob. And then we saw actually a significant drop in our market share as compared to some of our other competitors. And so what we essentially did, like a couple months ago or weeks ago, was we basically built 2 templates of blocks that we submit to the relay. Like, so for every block candidate, we include blobs in one version, and in one version we don't, and we just shoot them to the relays no matter what, and whoever wins wins. And what tends to happen in practice is when the fees are super low on the blobs, plus obviously the latency concerns, usually the latency is that much higher that if the fees are so low that blocks with blobs don't win as much. But then you can see once blob fees go higher, actually those blocks actually become valuable enough that even though that they're slower, they then get included. Another thing that we implemented like on our relay, which a bunch of you may know, is optimistic v2, which is essentially separating the header from the payload, which includes also the blobs. And that has a nice side effect that the size of the block doesn't matter at all. So it naturally will affect proposers who play timing games, but otherwise, it has no impact on the sort of get header call, then you sign and actually commit to a specific block. And so with optimistic v2, actually, we don't have any like latency impact at all, but that will naturally require like more relays to adopt optimistic v2.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so that's a good point, Terrence.
2 questions. So one question to the builder is that, do you guys simulate the total tips? For example, like the current problem across different ROBs is that some ROBs posted blobs are just pure batch, like a single EOA transactions, 22,000 gas. some rollups post blobs, but with some extra gas usage. For example, they need to update some Merkle accumulator for fraud proof, blah, blah, blah. So that causes more gas, right? So we have kind of this weird problem that like sometimes we only want to post blob, but we want the tips to be blobs only, but the tips also affect something else. So the question is, I wonder if builders simulate the total tip versus just looking at tip like a single value and compare them across transactions. I guess that's one question for the builder. The second question to the relayer is that why don't we broadcast the blobs earlier than the block, right? I think that's relatively safe. For example, that I understand we want to like wait for the block for a little bit to essentially prevent unbundling attack of the same slot. But I think the blobs could be like broadcast slightly earlier. So I wonder if we do this today.
Yeah, so first question. So the consideration is basically what's the total contribution to block value? So yeah, we do the simulation. And you know, if overall it's more valuable, it will be prioritized more. In terms of the propagation of the blobs ahead of time or separately, I think if I remember correctly, the blocks root team was experimenting with that, and there were some issues. I don't know if anyone's on the call, but I think that mitigates the timing games issue. But there's still the issue of the submission of the blocks from the builder to the relay in the first place, which is like the biggest part of the latency, or where most of the optimizations at least happen today. But of course, there's also timing games, and propagating the blobs from the relay ahead of time would mitigate that.
Yeah, I guess one caveat there is that the way blobs are propagated on the P2P layer is that they essentially need to be signed over by the proposer. So with the design today, this is like kind of all tightly coupled together. So it's not like, the builder could send the blobs, the relay could like optimistically start gossiping blobs. They have to wait for that proposer signature. So yeah, that part's kind of tricky. But yeah, that was a question. Yeah, so then going up the stack now between builder and relay, that was a question I was going to have is like, yeah, is there something with the APIs or things we could change? It sounds like with optimistic relaying, it's not really an issue. I don't know if other relays on the call have seen similar things to Titan. In terms of blobs and latency and submission and all this.
Yeah, I don't have the exact figures, but when there are blocks that are full of blobs, just everything takes longer at our relay also. Like it's not just it's not like there's one specific part really. Just like we've upgraded some of our machines recently, which helped a little bit, but it was just kind of like an overall slowdown. I think V2 specifically is what Kubi is calling out, not just optimistic mode in general, but V2. We did see the Titan has some nice open source metrics about this, and it looks like that is faster for blobs, which is nice, but we have not implemented V2 at our relay yet. So mostly just corroborating.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think there's just like many things going on, and it just points, I think, to the immaturity of blobs in the protocol. I think there's like economic issues, like, yeah, can I express my priority, and like, then does that allow a builder to like pack blobs in a nice way for me as a blob user? Separately, it sounds like there are like infra things that could be done, at least around like, quote the standard APIs. But if we all move to optimistic V2, sounds like that's less of an issue. So that's good. Yeah. Steph had a question. Have we seen side payment makers markets emerge for blob inclusion? I'm not sure. I guess, Steph, are you talking about like bespoke deals between like rollups and builders or something like this?
Yeah, exactly. Because to me, blob inclusion also always felt like a very natural place for pre-commits to initially emerge. Pre-commits being sort of also just like a block-based futures market implementation. And there's like multiple different ways that you can package this up as a product, right? It can be done like so transparently using some kind of protocol. It can just be done as a like some legal agreements where you say I'm gonna include your blobs within X window of time from your submission with X percentage reliability, and then that's something that either a block builder or a relay can offer to L2s to be able to get order flow. So I'm wondering if that's something that's been emerging, because the more difficulty that L2s have to get their things included, the more demand there is for this kinds of deals to take place.
We built a solution on this at ETH London that won a prize. We actually leveraged both mev-commit and Suave. Suave would run the auction as to who gets to pre-confirm the blobs, and then we thought relays would participate in that, but anyone could really. And then the rest of the network would coordinate to make sure the blocks deliver that. We've been talking to rollups, and they seem to be waking up to the need for this, whereas originally the blob market wasn't too contentious for them to want it. So yeah, we'll continue those efforts and keep people updated.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, obviously, there's now a spectrum of like, is this implicated with legal contracts, or is there somehow more trustless infrastructure for these types of agreements? And obviously, I think we'd all prefer more trustless solutions. But yeah, it could look like, yeah, again, bespoke deals between different rollups and different builders to ensure inclusion. And also relays too. So I guess there's like a bit of a design space as well.
I can't help but wonder though if it's, I mean, it really is a pricing question, at least in part, right? Even if it doesn't matter how you structure a deal, if the blobs aren't priced in a way that makes it worthwhile for a builder to include them, then it doesn't really matter if you have like a special side channel deal, or if you submit them to a more permissionless set of builders. So I think I would be pretty interested, especially because Titan is basically, if I understand, running an A/B test on this. One thing I wonder if we could do to help a little bit is like getting data, just so rollups like understand like the pricing piece of the equation. How much do you actually have to pay for inclusion? Because I think there's a pricing component, and then there's actually just like a performance, like latency component in other pieces, not just in block building, but also in like the way these things are gossiped. But one thing I feel like we don't have a ton of like really clear data on is like how these things should be priced, and how people should think about how much do I have to pay in order to get the kind of inclusion guarantees I would want. So like before we move to something where there are bespoke deals, I feel like just getting a little bit more data out there so people can understand the pricing would probably be pretty helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's just a complicated problem because like, at least with respect to a builder, it's like now you need to somehow consider, okay, like given the ambient mev at any one point in time, like the blob needs to somehow clear that price. So yeah, I think it just is tricky. And then definitely, yeah, having data. So if any builders or relays listening, if you'd like to share data on this, that'd be super, super helpful. Terrence and then Murat.
So I think the pricing problem is definitely one of it, but I think the main problem is that we have a clearing problem, and the clearing problem is that the current the blob mempool rule is too strict. So I can give you an example, right? There are two rules in the current blob mempool. The first rule is that the tip replacement is very, very high. If you want to replace your tip, you have to pay like a significant, like a double amount. The second problem is that we only allow one sender per transaction per nonce, right? So what that means is that I only have one shot as a rollup. I can either choose six blobs, 5 blobs, 4 blobs, and 3 blobs, right? So the natural equilibrium is that every rollup come together and they look at how many blobs they are posting and figure out their best strategy, right? For example, today, Tycho is always posting 1 blobs and Tycho posts a lot more often, right? So as a result, Base and Optimism and everyone else are posting 5 blobs to basically match that behavior, right? So we have this kind of a weird problem that if a rollup today, I send 6 blobs in my transaction, I pay a very high tip. But someone come later and send only 1 blob and pay a higher tip. The builder will include that 1 blob transaction, right? But then the 6 blob is basically stuck. But if that sender had known if someone is gonna send a 1 blob, so that sender will send 5 blobs instead. So we have this like weird matching problem. And because of that, we include 1 blob, but then the base fee actually went down, but then the tip is going up. So it kind of revert back to this like first price auction mechanism. So this is kind of weird. So I would label the current problem is more like the current mempool is not very friendly to allow this like mix match blob transactions.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot here. One thing I've like kind of been toying with over the last day is like having a more flexible way to like include blobs, because like right now it's actually quite rigid. Like they're attached to transactions and there's like synchronous execution attached and like all of this. And yeah, like to your point, given the mempool today, it's like even more rigid beyond that. So I do wonder if there's some way to like have rollups, for example, more flexibly say, hey, you know, here's just like some blobs that should be included, and then let builders have more flexibility to say these blobs go in these blocks and how, not necessarily attach them to transactions. Yeah, I guess one way to think about it is like more like a block level blob quote transaction than like the transaction level blobs we have today. Yeah. Marat?
I'd definitely like to second Terrence's point there, but regarding pricing, the two kind of aspects we hear are, one, you do have to send the whole blob when you're updating your price, or because transferring the blob itself is slow, you have to kind of predict what the marketable price will be like before you send it over, like as it gets over there. So that's one area that rollups are struggling with, and that their rate of update is you know, bottlenecked by the size of the blob. So they can't update their payment in real time, etc. You know, which we're telling them, hey, you can use mev commit to do this, but you know, it would be good for Ethereum itself to support something there. And the other thing is the lack of you know, a high correlation between your blob priority fee and your inclusion rate. So we've created a dashboard on this. I'll post here. You guys can see you know, basically priority fees are all over the place. You can have the highest priority fee and then you can wait for inclusion for a while. You can have the lowest priority fee and you can get included fairly quickly. And there's a lot of you know, dynamics that come into play here and variables, whether, you know, it's a 1 blob or 6 blobs, etc. But there's just multiple facets into the pricing problem. It's not just that they're contending with MEV or they have to pay a certain amount. It's just there's too many variables to consider there.
Yeah. So hopefully things harden over time and it becomes clear. Just from what I'm hearing, this sounds like it's not so much like a MEV supply chain infrastructure problem today, and more just, yeah, like fee economics issue.
It might be that we can do things to help. I think the decision point, especially with what Terrence was saying, which I agree with, I think that's definitely worth digging into more, is just if we can better measure like how, for example, like the mempool ejection rules in EL clients are actually working in practice for blobs, or looking at like, okay, if it's really so rigid as to like how you can update blob tips and do the things that you would need to do as a rollup, I think the question becomes like, is it possible to make these things more flexible in the actual like client implementations? My sense is that might be difficult, but I think it is worth us like at least bringing it to their attention and trying to get some concrete data to show why this is impacting rollups negatively. I know that like client teams have, they have fairly complicated formulas for choosing, how they include blobs. So it's not as though this hasn't been given thought, but I just don't know that it's been fully evaluated given like the market conditions we're seeing in practice. And so one route is to try to like bring more clarity to that and see if we can get useful changes shipped on that layer. If that's not the case, or that doesn't happen at the speed that we need, I think there are ways that you could use like things we have built for MEV infra to help here. And Terrence and I were chatting a little bit about this yesterday, but maybe we can use private mempools that have much more generous policies about how they keep transactions around than clients do in their mempools. I think that's like a road we don't want to go down if there's an even more permissionless option, but that might be a fallback that we could think about exploring a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. My understanding, at least with the blob mempool rules, is like I think they were picked pretty conservatively. And yeah, this would kind of be exactly the plan, is to see things on mainnet, and if there's issues or if it's possible to like relax the constraints, definitely that would be the preferred option. Okay. Anything else on blobs? Sounds like we just need to do more analysis and keep chugging along. Shout out to share data. That would be super helpful to inform, yeah, all the different things that we're thinking through. Okay, otherwise, anything else? If not, we can go ahead and wrap up today. Okay, sounds like that. Thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, hopefully this was helpful. A couple different exciting streams of development going along. And yeah, I'll see you all on the next call.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Right.